The empire that built Britain's roads, walls, baths, and cities may have ended its rule with a message: defend yourselves. The mystery is not whether Roman Britain broke apart. It is why the ruins of that break became the buried foundation of Anglo-Saxon England. Begin with a coin. Not a crown, not a treasure. A small bronze or silver coin, rubbed by fingers, counted by officials, paid to soldiers, dropped into soil, and later lifted from British earth as evidence of a world losing its shape. After 402 AD, according to the surviving material record, new imperial coin supply to Britain appears to have stopped. Old coins could still pass from hand to hand, but the absence of fresh coinage tells a colder story. Rome had not only ruled Britain with legions. It ruled through taxes, wages, markets, imported goods, official titles, and the belief that somewhere beyond the channel, the imperial machine was still turning. Place that coin beside a broken piece of fine red slip pottery, imported through Mediterranean trade, and the first layer of evidence opens. This was not just money, this was connection. The bowl came from a world of ships, ports, roads, accounts, soldiers, and confidence. Glassware in elite homes, wine, olive oil, smooth ceramics, bathhouses warmed by engineered heat, all of it depended on systems larger than any one town. When those systems weakened, Britain was not thrown instantly into emptiness. It was forced into a smaller life. The old Roman roads still crossed the landscape. Stone lines through rain, fields, and abandoned places. They did not disappear when orders stopped coming from the empire. They became the strangest evidence of all, a system still visible after the system had lost its power. At Londinium, the contrast was brutal. The city had once been one of Roman Britain's great urban centers, a port linked to the wider imperial world. Its height in the 2nd and 3rd centuries is sometimes estimated in the tens of thousands, though that number needs caution. What matters is the fall in urban intensity after imperial authority withdrew. Warehouses quieted beside the Thames. Streets once crossed by merchants and officials became thinner, emptier, less certain. The first layer says Roman Britain declined. The second layer says something more disturbing. Decline did not look the same everywhere. At Aquae Suli's modern bath, Roman culture had turned hot water into ceremony, architecture, healing, and status. Steam rose under stone. The pools announced that Britain belonged to an empire that could make even leisure feel official. But after Rome's retreat, places like this could no longer mean what they had meant before. The buildings remained. The habits that sustained them weakened. At Verulamium, modern St. Albans, and at Caliva, Silchester, the evidence points to urban deterioration. Public spaces lost their old civic purpose. Forums, once centers of law, trade, and public life, could become neglected. Each site has its own timeline, but the wider pattern is hard to ignore. The city as Rome imagined it was losing its reason to exist. Then comes the first crack in the familiar story. If Britain had simply collapsed, everything should have gone dark in the same way. But at Wroxeter, Viraconium, the ruins tell a different truth. Timber buildings rose inside Roman stone settings. The old city was not simply abandoned as a dead shell. People adapted it. They built smaller, rougher, more local structures inside the remains of a larger imperial order. That image matters, wood inside stone. It is survival without restoration. No emperor rebuilt the old town. No legion returned to reset the system. But people still occupied space, still organized life, still used what the past had left behind. And now the coin changes meaning. It is no longer just a sign that money stopped arriving. It is a sign that authority had become local, uncertain, and uneven. A town might shrink. A villa might lose its elite function. A fort might become something else. A road might remain useful even when the empire that planned it no longer maintained the world around it. To understand why, the evidence has to move north to Hadrian's Wall. Built around 120 AD, the wall was never just stone. It was a statement. Rome could draw a line across a landscape and make that line matter. Forts, barracks, gates, patrols, supply routes. The frontier was a machine of discipline. But in the early 5th century, that machine was under strain from far beyond Britain. The empire was fighting for itself. The Rhine frontier was crossed by groups including Vandals, Alans, and others in 406 AD. Gaul was threatened. Italy needed defense. The Danube was under pressure. Alaric and the Visigoths pressed into the imperial imagination as a danger to Rome's core. Britain, once valuable, became peripheral in a crisis of survival. Some troop reductions had already begun before the final break, though the exact timing and scale remain debated. Stilicho is linked to the recall of units for the defense of Italy. Then, in 407 AD, British troops acclaimed Constantine III as emperor. He crossed into Gaul, taking forces with him. The figure of about 6,000 mobile troops should be treated carefully. What matters is the direction of movement. The army did not march into Britain to save it. Men marched out. At Birdoswald, on Hadrian's wall, archaeology gives that movement a human shape. The site appears to have shifted from a Roman garrison community into a smaller farming settlement in the 5th century. A fort became a farm. Barracks that once housed soldiers belonged to another rhythm of life. Smoke from cooking fires replaced command. If the abandoned fort feels less like a ruin and more like a warning, type wall in the comments. The third layer of evidence is written in a record that survives through distance and uncertainty. Zosimus, a 5th century Byzantine chronicler, records in his New History a message associated with Emperor Honorius in 410 AD. According to the traditional interpretation, the British cities, the civitates, were told to look to their own defenses. This passage is debated. Scholars have questioned the context and even the intended recipients. But the reason it has haunted the story of Britain is obvious. It sounds like an empire closing a door. No burning palace, no final trumpet, just the idea of a sealed message arriving from Ravenna, where Honorius ruled and local councils understanding what it meant. Reinforcements were not coming. The province would have to defend itself. Together, the ruins show economic contraction. The forts show military transformation. The written record suggests political abandonment, or at least imperial inability. They do not prove a single day when Rome vanished. They prove something more frightening. The center stopped functioning before the edges stopped remembering it. Now the question changes. What happens when a province still has Roman roads, Roman walls, Roman towns, Roman memories, but no longer has Roman power? The answer appears in old forts repaired for local defense, in simple earthworks raised around vulnerable settlements, in communities that could not wait for official orders. Picts threatened from the north. Scots came from Ireland. Saxon raiders came from the continent. The Romano-British population was not facing one danger, but a weather system of insecurity. And in that insecurity, local strongmen mattered. Gildas, writing in the 6th century, does not give us a clean political history. He gives us anger, moral judgment, and accusation. He describes post-Roman rulers as tyrants. His work must be read with caution, because it is not neutral reporting. But even moral outrage can preserve the outline of a broken world. Leaders competing, communities exposed, old Roman authority turning harsher and more personal. Later tradition gives one of those leaders a name, Vortigern. Bede, writing in the 8th century, records the story that Vortigern invited Hengist and Horsa as Germanic mercenaries around 449 AD. The story is debated. It may preserve memory. It may be shaped by legend. It may simplify a process that unfolded over generations. But it points toward a real historical tension. Were the Anglo-Saxons invaders, hired defenders, settlers, or all of these at different times? The archaeology refuses to let us choose the easiest answer. Along the eastern and southern coasts, small timber halls and post-built houses appear in early Anglo-Saxon settlement patterns. These were not just traces of raids. Houses mean families. Cemeteries mean generations. Cremation urns and grave goods reveal changing customs, different identities, and new ways of marking the dead. A cremation urn does not shout conquest. It sits in earth, quiet and stubborn. But row after row of such evidence says that Britain's culture was being remade at ground level. The old myth wants one clean sentence. Rome left, darkness came, Saxons arrived, England began. That version survives because it is easy to teach, easy to paint, and easy to remember. Schoolbook language turned the post-Roman centuries into Dark Ages, a phrase that makes absence sound like ignorance. Later legend-making, especially around Mons Badonicus and the shadow of Arthurian tradition, added heroic silhouettes where the evidence was thin. Popular history compressed generations of fear, migration, adaptation, and survival into a single fall. But the ground does not tell a single fall. It tells of Roman villas with colorful mosaics whose elite life diminished or ended in different ways depending on region. It tells of hearths and simpler tools where luxury once signaled status. It tells of imported red pottery giving way to rougher local wares. It tells of Latin losing daily power in much of lowland Britain, while Brythonic Celtic survived more strongly in the west and north, and Old English spread with new settlements and kingdoms. This is the quiet, emotional wound of the story. Many of us inherit the past as a map with clean borders and confident labels. Roman Britain, Dark Ages, Anglo-Saxon England. The classroom version feels like one page turning neatly into the next. But under that page is a family leaving a shrinking town, a farmer using stone from a building whose purpose he no longer knows, a child growing up beside a road older than any story told at home. The past did not change its name all at once. It changed in kitchens, graves, markets, and fields. Then the record pulls us back. At Mons Badonicus, around 500 AD according to later tradition, Gildas records a British victory. The location, date, and leaders remain debated. Later centuries would connect that atmosphere of resistance to Arthurian legend, but the evidence does not allow Arthur to be treated as proven history. What it does show is that Anglo-Saxon expansion was not effortless. Britons resisted. Power shifted through conflict, negotiation, settlement, and time. By around 600 AD, much of lowland Britain was under Anglo-Saxon control, though the geography and pace varied. Britons persisted in Wales, Cornwall, Cumbria, and parts of southern Scotland. This was not total replacement. It was not simple peaceful blending either. The strongest responsible interpretation is messier. Migration, violence, alliance, intermarriage, language shift, and local collapse all worked together. Even names became evidence. Eboracum became associated with Eoforwic, and later York. Londinium's later story includes Londonwic, though the relationship between Roman and early medieval London is complex. River names like Thames and Severn preserved older roots beneath newer speech. Place name endings such as Ham and Tun point toward Germanic influence, while other endings require more careful linguistic handling. The island was written over, but not erased clean. Then, far from the ruined cities of the 5th century, the evidence flashes gold. At Sutton Hoo in Suffolk, an early 7th century ship burial reveals an elite world that was not primitive isolation. The burial contained objects of power, distance, and fusion. A helmet with Roman-style prestige imagery, Byzantine silver plates, and Germanic gold jewelry. In the darkness of the burial chamber, silver and gold did not belong to a vanished Rome or a purely Germanic future. They belonged to a new ruling culture assembling authority from whatever symbols still carried force. The so-called darkness was connected, not in the same way Roman Britain had been connected, but not severed from the world. Sutton Hoo shows an elite that could look across seas, absorb older imperial imagery, and build its own language of kingship. The collapse of Roman administration did not prevent ambition. It changed the materials from which ambition was made. Christianity followed a similar pattern of rupture and return. In Roman Britain, Christianity had taken root by the 4th century, though its spread and institutions varied. In western regions such as Wales and Cornwall, Christian tradition survived in pockets. St. Patrick, described as a Romano-Briton captured and later connected to mission in Ireland, belongs to this wider world of movement, loss, and religious transmission. Among Anglo-Saxon communities, Germanic gods such as Woden, Thunor, and Tiw remained part of the religious landscape. Then in 597 AD, Pope Gregory sent Augustine to Kent. Augustine's mission established a see at Canterbury, and King Ethelbert of Kent converted. This was not Rome returning as an army. It was Rome returning as a church. By around 700 AD, most of Anglo-Saxon England was nominally Christian, though conversion varied by kingdom and depth. Latin literacy became tied to the church, but it would be careless to claim literacy had vanished completely everywhere before that return. Old Roman Christianity, British Christianity, Germanic kingship, and continental mission crossed one another. Even Beowulf, later and literary rather than direct proof, reflects that mixture, pagan heroic memory shaped through Christian language. The excavation now reaches its fullest shape. Roman Britain did not end as a single corpse on a single day. It decomposed into local survival, and from that survival new powers grew. Kent, Sussex, Wessex, Essex, East Anglia, Mercia, and Northumbria would later be remembered through the idea of the heptarchy. These kingdoms were not Roman provinces wearing new names. They were the products of a transformed island. And yet Rome's remains still mattered. Roads could still guide movement. Old walls could still define places. Ruined towns could still offer stone, memory, and authority. Even centuries later, when Viking invasions began in the late 8th century, and the great heathen army overran much of England in the 860s and 870s, the question of survival returned. Alfred the Great of Wessex, reigning from 871 to 899, resisted that pressure, won at Edington in 878, and reorganized defense through burhs. The link between Alfred and a shared English identity through Angelson should be handled carefully, but the direction is clear. By the mid-10th century under Athelstan, a more unified kingdom of England emerged, though the exact meaning of unified depends on territory, allegiance, and political definition. Still, the long arc is visible. The end of Roman Britain created the conditions for a different kind of England, not as a clean birth, but as a hard inheritance. Return now to the coin. At the beginning, it looked like a small sign of economic failure. A worn object in a hand, a market losing confidence, a province no longer supplied by the imperial mints of Gaul or Italy. But after the roads, the towns, the wall, the message of Honorius, the anger of Gildas, the settlement evidence Canterbury and Sutton Hoo, the coin means more. It is the last cold piece of a system that people outlived. They spent it, buried it, lost it, reused it, and then moved into a world where other things carried value: land, kinship, weapons, belief, language, and kingship. The empire left stone behind, the people left evidence. And the evidence does not give us the comfort of a simple ending. It gives us a broken road crossing a wet field, a timber hall inside a Roman shell, a cremation urn under dark soil, a bishop's seat at Canterbury, a helmet rising from Sutton Hoo's earth like a face from another age. Roman Britain was not remembered wrongly because one authority erased it. It was simplified by labels, legends, schoolroom shortcuts, and the human need to turn confusion into a clean story. The real past is stranger and more powerful, a province abandoned by imperial certainty, forced into local survival, and slowly remade into something no Roman official could have planned. And this story is not finished, because when empires retreat, the question is never only what they leave behind, it is who learns to rule the ruins. In the next Dark Timeline episode from this Roman Britain cluster, we go deeper into the world that rose after the legions, the contested arrival of the Anglo-Saxons, the legends built around Hengist, Horsa, Vortigern, and Arthur, and the evidence buried beneath those names. Subscribe and follow the road past the edge of Rome.